is because we don't like to think about this. We don't like to think there's a consequence to our free will. We don't like to think that the good we do will do more good than we can imagine. And we don't like to think that the bad we do will cause harm and suffering and disappointment and loss for a lot longer than we intend. Why is there suffering? Much of our suffering comes from our free will. Much of the suffering of humanity is because God has given us the great blessing and challenge of a free will. Made in the image of God, we get to choose. Will I walk this way or this way? Will I do this or not? Will I say this or not? And so we ask, how can this happen? Some of it is very knowable. I asked, how can it be this man got drunk and ran over my friend and killed him? How can that be? Here's the answer. Free will. The guy decided he would drink and drive. And killed my friend. Because he had free will, he decided he would drink and drive. And my friend is dead. How can that happen? Free will. How can it be that I got upside down in this mortgage? I can't believe this. I mean, how can this be? I had a person recently ask, how can this be? I can't pay this off. How did this happen? How did I borrow so much money? Why did I do that? And I said, free will. You wanted more than you could pay for. Now you're upside down. Free will. How did I fail this test? A student recently asked me, how did I fail this test? How could God let this happen? I mean, the entire course was riding on the final exam. I failed the final. How can this be? Free will. The movie that you watched the night before the test, hopefully you enjoyed it. Because instead of studying, you watched the entire movie and then went tired, unprepared to the test, and you failed. And you didn't consider the long consequence, the ramifications, the ripple effect of that, and now it's serious. How did it happen? Free will. Why did they promise they would do the work? I paid them, and then they didn't do the work. How could they do that? How can God allow that? Free will. How could they do that, Mark? They wanted your money. And they've got it. Why did he say I was the only one? How could he tell me I was the only one? Now I've got these STDs, and he told me I was the only one. Why would he do that to me? He wanted sex. Free will. Let me ask you, here's a question I ask. Why did my dad die? My dad died of a massive heart attack. How could God allow that? Way too soon, way too young. My dad started smoking when he was 17. Most of his life, he smoked 3 packs a day. And there were several years of his life when he smoked 4 packs of cigarettes a day. He smoked himself to death. My dad was in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean on his way to the European theater in World War II at age 17 when the President of the United States came on the radio and announced to America that no boys under 18 would go to war. My dad was 17 in the middle of the Atlantic on the way. Dad started smoking in the European theater. He was in the Bloody One, the 1st Infantry. He was at the Battle of the Bulge. He was with Patton at the crossing of the Rhine. My dad's feet froze. They almost had to amputate my dad's feet in the Black Forest in Germany. He started smoking. He had no idea the consequence of that decision. He had no idea it'd be so addictive. I have friends and wonderful friends who are my father's generation who I mean, they've been smoking for years. The addiction of that is overwhelming. And there are people who had information about not only the carcinogens of cigarette smoke, but also the addictive tendency, and they withheld information. And then people made decisions, and my dad smoked himself to death. Free will. People do things that are just so shocking and so bizarre that you can't even believe it. And you think, how could God let this happen? How could God let this happen? How can God let us be in a country where there's such depravity that people live in fear and lock their doors? How can God let this happen? Free will.